For the last 2 years, I've been narrating a journey on this YouTube channel regarding a legal issue over the property that I own in Bahía de Banderas, Nayarit. It's the home that I purchased shortly after my deportation from the US. It's where I began to sprout my roots here in Mexico. Some of you also watched me document my journey to remodel the home, expand it to be able to cater to my growing family, which included myself and my 5 children. My online business that began to grow and I needed more space. So for the last 2 years, I've narrated what's been going on with the HOA Wars in Mexico. This is season 3, where I began to share the legal journey, my fight to assert my rights as a homeowner, as a woman, and as a Mexican national.
Kearns woman already charged with forging checks. Trucking company is now facing charges that she illegally billed customers of another company. Prosecutors charge Ana Garcia with communications fraud today.
Mexicanos deportados en Estados Unidos quedaron plasmados en un puente internacional en el Paso del Norte en Ciudad Juárez.
Ana Garcia currently lives in the Mexican state of Jalisco.
¿Qué le dirías a una persona que piensa que la deportación es el fin?
El fin de la discriminación, el fin del miedo.
Esta es una historia que solo verá aquí.
Zuli, este es precisamente el caso de esta joven, una mujer que vivió por años aquí en los Estados Unidos y terminó con sus 5 hijos, ciudadanos de este país, en México, un país al que dice ella no conocía.
Y se está convirtiendo en el... Me toca el corazón porque Ani se está convirtiendo en el sueño mexicano, el sueño de muchas personas de salir adelante en su propio país.
Some of you already have a spoiler alert of what happened in that hearing if you follow my other social media pages. But many of you are new here and perhaps haven't watched season 1 and season 2. So before I dive into the judge's ruling and what's going on with the criminal charges, I want to give you a quick recap of my relationship with the individual that is at the center of this ongoing investigation, who has now been criminally charged and is facing prison time over the actions that were taken over that property. Some of you already know the nature of my relationship with this person because you watched season 1 and season 2, and there's so much context in there from, recordings of the HOA meetings, screenshots, conversations I've had with him. So I'm going to do my best to summarize my history with this person before I jump into the legal case, because I believe it's very important so that you guys can understand why the judge ruled the way that he did, particularly making note that this was a gender-based crime committed against a vulnerable woman, that this was gender-based moral violence that was issued towards my person, my property, and my family by this individual. Really quick, I bought this home in 2020. 2 years after I was deported, I was here with just my 2 babies, and I made a list of just things we're gonna quickly hit. I will include some receipts, but some of them have already been shown in other videos, so I'm gonna make this quick because I wanna jump right into the case, right into the judge's ruling, okay? So I bought my home in 2020. This individual, Jimmy, I was actually the first person to move into this community. They were brand new homes, a brand new gated community. We were the only one at the time, and I was the first person to move into the community. I remember this because of how scary it was the first few nights, just me there with my 2 kids, and everything was dark. There were no other cars. There was nothing. Okay, I moved into this home in the fall of 2020. Jimmy was the second person that moved into this community. Okay, so early on, we formed some type of relationship, I would say, as neighbors, right? Where we were the first one there. We were starting to watch other people move in, and he quickly took a very helpful role of getting things together, anything that had to do with the community, maintenancing, reaching out to new neighbors, creating a WhatsApp group so that we can start building a community communication between houses. He was very helpful. He was very friendly. I was a single mom of 2 at the time, and I say 2 because at the time my 3 other kids weren't living here yet. So by all means to him, I was just a single mother of 2. I remember, he would come over, help me with my gardening. His wife at the time was selling food out of her house. I was one of her best customers, probably buying tons of food from her every week because I didn't have much time to cook. And you guys know I'm not a fan of cooking anyway. His wife would give like classes for kids out of their home, and my kids would go over there. There was a friendly relationship with this individual, okay? Now, and where things started to kind of, I want you guys to understand where the turf began to shift a little bit with my relationship, and narrate a history so that you guys can understand how I became the problematic woman in this community, okay? Now, when we were sold our homes, they were sold under un régimen de condominio, which is under an HOA association, okay? But that doesn't mean that the HOA is formed. Like, you have to take additional steps as homeowners to register like a legal entity, designate roles, designate who's in charge of A, B, C, and D, okay? So in November of 2020, shortly after some of us had moved in, he got us together as a community and began to establish that we're going to need to pay for the light, we're going to need to pay for the maintenance of the pool, we're going to need to pay for all these things, right? So we should start thinking how we're going to take care of these things. So he as an individual got us together, and because there was no bank account, there was no legal association, it was just neighbors coming together, how are we going to take care of our properties collectively? He established a monthly HOA payment to him in cash, right? Which was expected. That was normal. I'm a first-time homeowner, mind you, right? So I don't really, and in Mexico, in a foreign country to me, and I say foreign because everything here was new to me, including owning a home, including HOA. Before this, I had only rented, So anyway, I began to ask questions about these payments because we were being billed. So it took 400 pesos to cover the maintenance for each home, which was about $20. He was billing us about 800, double, because he wanted us to create a savings account. In case there was ever some large repair that we needed to take care of, we had somewhere to pull out of, because he stated that there would be houses that would not be able to afford a large amount, on a short notice. So some houses were in favor of this, but I questioned this and I didn't agree. I didn't feel comfortable paying double in cash just in case. And I was in a position where I felt, well, if there's ever a big repair, I will just pay out of pocket that month. Well, this was the first time where he took a stance of you do what I say or not. And he pretty much said, if you don't pay the amount that we've all agreed on, I won't receive your payment and you will fall behind. Right. So although I didn't agree, I paid, and I was paying double. There was another house 14. Some of you guys may know her, that also didn't agree with this. And we linked together and we just kind of questioned it, but there wasn't much we could do. We didn't want to be the problematic ones. We didn't want to create any issues. So although I didn't agree, I paid him every month in cash or direct deposited to somebody's personal account that he gave me. The money that he asked us to pay to cover our house, our maintenance, and also to cover the savings account we wanted to build. I didn't agree, but he pretty much said, if you don't pay me all of it, I'm not receiving any of the money. Mind you, this was before anything legally had been established, right? So we were just coming together as good neighbors for a common cause of goodness in our community, right? So that was the first time I really kind of questioned him. From then on, I would make my payments every month. We built this WhatsApp group where neighbors would talk about certain topics and complaints and payments. And I want to mention that I participated very little because I often felt like I offended people in the way that I talked. I noticed early on that there were some cultural differences between my neighbors and I, that whenever I would try to participate in these topics, whatever they were in the group chat, whether it was, we shouldn't be doing this, we should have these rules, whatever, I would offend people. And it wasn't that I was trying to offend, but it was the way that I would say things, or that to me were culturally normal and acceptable, but to them it was offensive, right? So I stopped. I tried to just be quiet in there because I didn't want to create more issues, but I already felt like people viewed me a certain way. I felt like an outsider. Okay. I want to talk about what transpired where Jimmy and I fell out, and this was the root of everything. Okay. So in June of 2021, I held a birthday party for my daughter. Jimmy and his wife have regularly attended our birthday parties. 2021, I threw a birthday party at our community pool, right? We had set up like systems of like, you can use the pool for this, you can use the pool for that, right? So in June of 2021, I host a big party for my 3-year-old with a bouncer. His wife helped me with decorations. His wife helped me with food. They attended the birthday party, okay? That's how decent of terms we were on. I would have considered us friendly neighbors. I would have considered us maybe even friends. I don't know. You're coming to my daughter's birthday parties, right? So anyway, by the time that party was hosted, we had came together as neighbors and came up with rules, right? Mind you, these are not legally established rules, but they were rules that we said we would follow for the common good of our community. One of those rules was that the pool shut down at 12 a.m., okay? So that night, I'm there, and we had rented a big jumper for the kids that had a slide over the pool, right? So the jumper's full of kids. There's some neighborhood kids there's my kids in there, and I'm there with 2 of my girlfriends. That's all that's left at the party. We had been having some drinks, like beers, throughout the day. We weren't drunk. We were just socializing while the kids were having fun. Well, at 12:02, Jamie came over and told us it's time to pack up. The pool has closed, and and I said, okay. I agreed. So we'll start cleaning up, and he walked off. Right? I can't tell you how much time passed, but no more than 10 minutes before I heard the kids start screaming, and the jumper just started deflating, and I could see Jimmy walking behind me. So I put 2 and 2 together that he had unplugged the jumper, right? The kids are screaming. The jumper starts, it's hanging over the pool. So I run and I plug it back in, and the jumper starts, by now some kids had fallen into the pool, but the jumper was sinking into the pool with kids in it, right? So I was pissed. I don't remember what I said to him, okay? But I was so angry that he did that, because it wasn't that I wasn't going to comply. It was, I interpreted he wanted me to get up the minute he said something, right? And so I told him, like, WTF, like, I was so mad. I'm like, you have no right to come over here and do that. And he was like, you guys need to clean up. The pool closes at midnight, right? So I had plugged the bouncer back in. I start getting the kids out. He goes and turns off the electricity to the entire pool. So now we can't plug it back in, and now we're left in the dark. He was trying to force us out, right? And we had to clean up in the dark and everything. So we cleaned up, we took the kids inside, and the party was done. I remember being so pissed, like, what the fuck happened out there? Like, he doesn't have the right to just come over and, like, force us to do these things. Mind you, these were not legally established rules yet. They're just rules that we had came up with as a community, that I should have been following. I will just say that it wasn't like I said, fuck you, it was just, I didn't get up the moment he told me to. So the next morning, I thought it was important to let the community know what had happened. So I text the group chat, hey, this is what happened. I'm concerned, that our property owners, like our rights, we have rights as well. And this isn't how we should. Let me just read what I said, right? I said, I think it's important for us to touch on the topic of the rights that we have while living here. And our administrator feels the right to turn off the power to the pool area to try to force us, these rules upon us, right? And I said, yesterday, without any warning, he came at 12 a.m. and disconnected the jumper. I said, I reconnected it so that the kids could get out. And the administrator then returned, and he threatened us with turning off the light at 12:02 a.m., right? So I actually got some of these facts wrong. I'm reading off of this text message. And I told him, told the community, I offered to pay whatever fine. I would be responsible for going over the hour, but I insist he doesn't have the right to turn off the electricity to a common area. And I said the kids were left in the jumper in the dark, and this was a safety issue. I said, I understand that we have rules that we should follow, that we've established out of goodwill, but they're not forcible. They're not legally established, right? And in this situation, his actions put these children at risk. So he starts giving his version of events, right? There were neighbors that had kids in the pool that jumped in and said that was not right for you to do. However, the majority of other neighbors in there that didn't have kids in there only saw, well, she broke a rule, and they were like, we should be following the rules. All they were focused on is, well, we should be following the rules, which, mind you, I wasn't disagreeing. I was just saying there's a way to do things. If somebody doesn't follow the rules, you fine them. You can't force them to, right? You don't physically exert A, B, C, and D for them to force them. And in this situation, you put the kids at risk. So I was shocked when I told the community about that they sided with him. The majority of them sided with him except the parents that had kids in the jumper. And they were like, it wasn't right. And then one of the kids in there actually told her mom that he had approached her first before even coming to me and telling her that it was time for them to get out. And so that mom was like, my daughter told me this is what happened, and you didn't even go, to the adult first. You were telling the kids. And so that situation, and I even dropped a screenshot of a news article where there was an individual arrested for doing just that. Like, I went as far as to try to explain to these neighbors what this man did is criminal. Regardless of what I did, regardless if I didn't get up, whether it was 12:02, 12:40 a.m., what this man did was reckless, and there's been people arrested for doing the same thing. Nobody really listened. Again, by then, I feel like I had already became that this neighbor that's always, and there were people in there that were like, all this, like, always trying to make trouble out of everything, blah, 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 blah. I just felt so misunderstood, right? So when that happened, that was when Jimmy and I fell out. I was so angry with him. He even texted me personally during that conversation with the group chat. And you forgot how things happened because you were drinking beer so many hours that you don't remember. But it's strictly your responsibility over those children. They had been in there more than an hour, and you and your friends were just there and weren't even watching the kids. And he's like, I told you guys that I was going to turn off the lights. I told you before I disconnected the jumper. He tried to make it seem like, bitch, you were so drunk, you don't remember how things even happened. And I have a video of everything, because at the time he had a camera that pointed right at the pool, which, mind you, this had been an issue that I had also brought up previously, that it was an invasion of our privacy for his private cameras on his property to be pointing directly at the pool. We had cameras that were part of, the community that had been installed in certain points. But I had raised a concern prior to this that his private cameras pretty much like spying on the pool at all hours, because this is what he would do. He would sit there and just like look through his foot. Like, it was weird. And I brought up a concern that I had young daughters that were in their swimming suits at the pool, and it made me uncomfortable that this neighbor with his private security camera was set right on the pool. And that had been an issue a couple months prior, right? And there were people that agreed with me. The majority, they were just like, this girl is so problematic. So I was constantly like questioning these things that he would do that I just felt were wrong. Personally, I stopped using the pool because of that, because I knew he was recording everything and hawk watching everything, just like this message where he was like, you weren't even watching the kids, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, and he was trying to argue, the dude in the article was arrested for violating property rights. Let's not confuse things. And I'm like, no, go read it. He was arrested because the children were hurt by what he did. So he's in there trying to argue over the dude that was arrested for doing the same thing that he had just done. And so we started arguing, and he's like, imagine all the risks that your children face when they're out every day playing around because you don't watch them and you're an irresponsible parent. You let them out at all hours of the night. Like, he was so anti-kid. One thing about this man is he was always complaining about kids running around. My kids frequently were outside playing, but they were in our home. They were in my home by 8 p.m. Right? So there were a lot of little topics that started coming up between Jimmy and I. And I told him, like, you could tell you don't have kids. Number one, you could tell you don't have kids. And how sad that you won't take responsibility for your actions and you rather just deflect it everywhere else, because what he did was wrong. I don't care in what context. I don't care if I was everything you said was right. The fact that he disconnected that jumper with kids in it sitting over a pool, they could have drowned. The jumper could have, if I hadn't reacted that quick, and if I had been drunk like he claimed, I wouldn't have reacted that quick. But if I hadn't plugged that shit back in, that jumper would have been dragged into the pool with kids in it, right? And so I felt so gaslit that like everybody was focusing on the fact that, well, she was in there at 12:02 a.m. She should have been out at 12. Okay, cool. So you issue me a fine, and then we chalk it up to that. You don't come in here and put these kids in danger. So that was the root of why we fell out. From that day on, I said, fuck Jimmy. Fuck him. I was mad at him for what he did to my children. And I think anybody with common sense, if you had kids in that jumper, would have felt some type of way. He was not protecting, you know, the peace in the community. He was not just making sure we were following rules. He was forcing us to follow the rules that he had set. Because mind you, at this point in 2021, they were not legally established or enforceable. Period. Okay? So anyway, from that incident, he made my life miserable, or he tried, right? Stupid things. He wouldn't, he would look for any opportunity to blast me in the group chat. For example, one time my son took the dog on a walk, didn't pick up the dog shit. Sadly, it happened right in front of Jimmy's house, right? So what did Jimmy do? He took the video, posted it in the group chat, put me on blast instead of just coming to me and being like, yo, you know? And I was like, well, I had no idea. You know, I apologized. I reprimanded my child and I went out there and picked it up. And I'm like, why wouldn't you just come to me? Like, what? ¿Qué necesidad that to like, it wasn't done maliciously. It was a child, right? It was a teenager. Okay, kids will do stupid shit and I'll come out there and pick it up. Any opportunity he had, he would blast me in the group chat. So much that I came to a point that I left the group chat. Because it was constantly me and him arguing and him trying to put me out. And he was succeeding in painting this picture of me that this is a neighbor that's always doing shit, that she's always breaking the rules, she's always doing this, she's always doing that. So I left the group chat and I said, anybody needs me, you know where to find me. If there's any issues with my home, with my kids, with my dog, house 13. And I left. Right? And so things started to get really strained between the community and I. Another example, in August 2021, they came to an agreement that each house would have to pay a certain amount of money to maintain their water on because the city had passed it on to us, right? He didn't communicate that to me. I heard of it from a neighbor. He was handing out papers from the city that we needed to go pay the amount. Well, it got back to me from a neighbor and I hit him up and I was like, why didn't you let me know about this? He goes, because you're not the homeowner. Mind you, he had been dealing with me up until then. And I was like, what are you talking? So I took my house deed to his house and I said, here you go. Anything regarding my house, you need to come give it to me, right? Like you have an obligation as the administrator to communicate these things about my home, right? So he started using his position to like push me out of things I needed to know, little things like that would fuck me, right? That would affect my home, that would make me fall behind. I would have had my water shut off if that other neighbor hadn't let me know, right? So just these systematic things that he kept doing, you know, low key. So anyway, in 2022 is when I began the build of my house. This is after everything I just told you has happened. We don't have a great relationship. I did feel like he was constantly looking for ways to fuck me, right? So anyway, me, ignorant to the things that I should have been doing, my obligations as a homeowner, he was the administrator. So I went to him when I told them we wanted to expand our home the same way multiple neighbors had. I still remember verbatim what he said to me. As long as you don't alter the front, you can do whatever you want. Okay, so we started building in 2022. And I remember he would literally give me access. So the houses on each side of me were both empty. He had keys to them because he was helping the homeowners manage them, right? He would let me in. He would literally tell me, let me know when you need into house 12 because we were lifting up the wall on that side. We were installing windows, right? So he sat by and helped me build, helped me expand my home. No, he didn't give me any signature. No, we didn't go to the homeowners. I just trusted in what he told me because he was the fucking administrator at the time, right? So fast forward to today, when you hear him say that I didn't have permission, I had his. And I took his word for it and I trusted in him when I shouldn't have. Hey, down to things like I would ask him, hey, we're about to bring in a bunch of material. Can we have it on the sidewalk? Mind you, the sidewalk is not my private property. It belongs to everybody. He gave me permission. Yeah, just make sure you're not blocking the roadway. So I had hundreds of bricks on that sidewalk for months at a time. Nobody said anything. No write-ups were issued. No, the city wasn't called. He just watched me brick by brick lay that house down. Open the gates, help me bring in the trucks, help me get into the neighbor's house so I could, do the wall over there, everything. All right, so in 2023, we have our first, and mind you, in 2023, I'm done building this. My house is done. I have 3 levels in the back. 2023, this is the first time he brings it up, that I have built without permits. He tells the neighbors that I did this without permission, without their approval, that he told me multiple times to stop, that I ignored him and I kept building. Okay, mind you, this is 2023. I had no knowledge of the laws, of the rules. I didn't even know if we were legally established or not, right? So that hit me out of nowhere. So I remember being in the meeting, just trying to explain to the neighbors, like, I didn't know that we had to do it like this. You know, and I remember stuttering. My Spanish was fucked up. I didn't know how to express myself. And I just remember the neighbors saying, well, just because you don't know about the rules and the laws doesn't mean you're exempt from them, right? So then in that meeting, Jimmy asked, is anybody opposed to me going and filing a formal complaint with the city? Nobody raised their hands, right? They just said they weren't opposed, that he would be going as an individual, not in representation of the community, to file a complaint. Nobody raised their hands. And I remember feeling really shitty that, because I felt like they supported him, right? So I left the meeting before the meeting was even done. I think that didn't look well for them either. It maybe came off like I was just mad, but I just felt shitty. I felt like they were all ganging up on me. And maybe they weren't, but that's how it felt in the moment. I felt attacked by him. I felt misrepresented. They didn't believe me, right? I tried to say, like, I did it with his permission. And he's like, no, she didn't. No, she didn't. They took his word over mine, right? So I went back to my home and I just prepared myself. I said, okay, I'm going to be sued. I didn't know what came next, right? So sometime shortly after that summer, the city came to my house. There was no construction left. Like, there was nothing. I wasn't home. They came and they left, and that was the end of it, right? In February of 2024, some of you may have heard this HOA meetings because I have recorded them and shared them with my members. In February 2024, we have an HOA meeting where he brings up the topic of my house. He gives a big discussion. In fact, I may even include some of that footage to give you guys an idea of who this character is, the things that he said, right, and the position that these houses took because of the things that he said. If you are part of my members, you probably have already watched this meeting. I'm not going to play all of it because I don't think it's too long, right? I want to make this a quick recap so I can jump into the court hearing and the charges. But this meeting, the 2024 meeting, is where everything kind of got really, really heated, right? This was after chanclas, right? Some of you know that I had a crazy neighbor that got mad because there were dust on her house, and she came to my house. She was acting crazy. Her husband was throwing dog shit at my windows, right? That was the year of 2024, right? That year, before this HOA meeting, that neighbor went to the city. She had friends in the city. She was able to send them to my house within days. I was served with a notice from the city. She served me with the notice from the police department that there was some type of mediation scheduled. I was getting hit left and right. I will give it to my chanclas neighbor that she put a lot of heat on me right before that meeting, right? So I knew that meeting, my house would be a topic because the city had just came and they had actually shut me down. Mind you, in 2024, I was no longer in construction. I was completely done. She sent the city, she paid them. I watched it on my camera. Some of you guys have already seen this. I'm not gonna sit here and like re-narrate everything that happened. But I do have receipts on this playlist where you can see where she paid off the city down the street. He came back, shut me down. In fact, now knowing what I know now, I can actually sue the city because when they shut me down, there was no construction. They walked my entire house. There was no material. There was nothing, but they still decided to shut me down. They fined me, right? And so this happened right before the HOA meeting. And so I knew that my house would be the topic at that HOA meeting. And sure enough, it was. Okay, Jimmy and the neighbor pretty much said I was so problematic and I was always recording and the city had came to shut me down because it's an illegal build and this and that. So in this meeting, everybody is jumping all over we spent an hour where they were just talking shit about my house. I had an attorney with me. They didn't let her speak. They wanted me to speak and I opted to keep quiet. Why? Because during this meeting, I felt like they wanted me to come out of pocket. They made comments about my children. They twisted things. They said things that didn't happen. In particular, three of the male HOA board members mentioned we even went to her house and tried to speak to her, to present that I was this problematic person that just said, fuck you, I'm gonna do what I want. Well, what actually happened is they went to my house, intimidated me, thought they were gonna catch me alone. And this was the first time they threatened to sue me out of my home. Okay, so they went over there pretty much telling me, if you don't do what we say, we are gonna have you removed from your home. No, I didn't take that well. I was intimidated. And in that meeting, one of them said, it's not like we went over there to beat her up. I'm still like disgusted by the fact that he said that. And let me not get too much into this because, so I was constantly just felt cornered by this entire community and misrepresented. So in this meeting, many things were said and other neighbors are listening in where they're like, oh, yeah, she's, I didn't say anything. I didn't defend myself. They didn't allow the attorney to speak because she was making legal sense, telling them how this was unlawful. They didn't want to hear it from her. So they denied me my right to speak through a legal representative, right? So after that meeting, Jimmy says he's not going to accept my money for the monthly obligation that I have for my services, right? Until I pay a daily fine of $20, because every day that my bill exists and that I don't knock it down, like him and the community want me to do, I'm violating their internal rules. Although in the beginning, after that meeting, I remember feeling like, fuck, man, right? And I tried to reason with them. So I went back and forth through written correspondence with Jimmy because he was the one at the head of this. I offered to pay for the solar panels for our community to make retribution, right? I acknowledge, okay, I violated this rule. I would like to make it right. And I would like to make a financial contribution for the good of the community where I will pay for the solar panels, right? And this was all through written correspondence. Mind you, I'm not communicating this to the community. I'm communicating it to the HOA board, who at the time was Chanclas and Jimmy, and a couple other neighbors that I don't believe were even involved in any of this. So anyway, I thought, okay, let me make this right. The construction's already done. I'm not affecting anybody. There were multiple neighbors that were like, well, it's already done. It doesn't look bad. So I offer, I'll pay for this, right? Jimmy comes back and he says, no. The solution to your problem is not paying us off. Maybe he felt offended. I don't know. But, he said, you need to knock it down. So I tried again and I said, okay, I will pay for the maybe not solar panels. I said, I will pay for my workers to build a security house at the front of our community where the gates open so that we can hire a security guard. We were the only community out of all those communities that didn't have a security guard. We're the oldest koto, because by now there's a bunch of us, they have built more and, there's people living in them. We're the only one that doesn't have solar panels and we're the only ones that don't have a security guard. I wonder why, right? So I offered during that back and forth after the meeting of 2024, I will make a financial contribution for the community to make right for the violation of this rule, right? And at the same time, I had already got right with the city, right? The city had signed off on my build. It's not an illegal construction anymore. Well, he just kept saying, no, you have to demolish it, right? So in February of 2024, after we start going back and forth is when they start coming to my house and finding me every single day. Okay. It's when I'm told that in just 2 weeks, we're going to have signatures to kick you out. Right. So Jimmy starts going door to door without me there, mind you, and telling people, I don't know what, so that they would give their signature to agree to sue me out of my home and force me to auction it and to pay them for these fines that I'm not paying, right? So I was completely intimidated. I didn't know what else to do. There were things that I probably did during that time. Some of you watched it on TikTok where I was just trying to defend myself and that maybe I did things I shouldn't have done. Like I remember I posted a conversation with the woman administrator that was helping me at the time. And, we had a conversation in private and she shared some things with me about how, yes, I see what's going on. this, Chanclas and Jimmy just have a personal issue with you, and that's not the way to do about it. So I posted it on TikTok. I publicized it, thinking that this would make the neighbors see, that this would help me, that the neighbors would be like, oh, right? Well, that was a bad move. And I made that decision out of so much stress and anxiety. Something had happened. I don't remember what it was. Oh, I think it was the night that one of them came to my house at like 10, 11 p.m. and they left a notice from the prosecutor's office. I don't fucking know. Some shit Chanclas was doing, right? So I was just under so much pressure that I posted that video thinking that would help me. Thinking that the neighbors would suddenly see like, okay, Chanclas and Jimmy have a personal issue with her and they're using this to hurt her. That's not what happened. The entire community turned on me in an instant. If there were any people at the moment that had empathy for me, it went out the window when I posted that conversation with the administrator. So anyway, you guys know that in April of 2024, I made the decision to move out. I couldn't, as much as I wanted to fight, I was cornered in my home. I was being harassed every day. I couldn't sleep. I wasn't eating. They had turned off my remote, right? The little remote that opened the gate, they had deactivated it. So every time I was pulling up to the community, regardless of what time it was, I had to leave my kids outside by themselves in a running vehicle, open the walk-in gate, run in, push the button and run back out. It was not only an inconvenience, but I was nervous, especially because at the time there was theft going on. There was people breaking in, stealing vehicles out of our community. So there was crime going on at the time, right? So there was just so many factors that eventually I said, I can't live here. I can't live here. I acknowledge that these people don't want me here. They're making, true to his word, in the meeting of February 2024, he said they would make my life miserable until I folded to their demands, until I gave in to what they were asking me to do. And I didn't give in to what they asked, but I left. I left the community that I had been a part of for 4 years, where I had sprouted roots. Some of you guys watched this on TikTok, and it was probably the most painful decision. I only got to enjoy my home for a few weeks. It took me a few years to finish out the remodel and everything, the rooftop, and I moved out a few weeks later. It was a difficult decision, but I could not live in those conditions. I remember feeling afraid to even have my door open, that neighbors were gonna come and say stuff or throw dog shit at my window. I felt very unwanted. I felt very misunderstood. There was no empathy. I remember after that meeting in 2024, my kids were approached that they couldn't put out their store anymore. I don't know if you guys remember, but my kids used to set up a little candy store and we would sell Costco candy to the neighborhood kids, and they did that for about a year. Well, after that meeting, they were approached and told they could no longer do it. We were denied access to the pool. It was the twins that year, their birthday was in April. They wanted to throw a birthday party at the pool. We were told, no, we don't have access to it. They started systematically pushing us out, right? And it felt nasty. We had this beautiful home, but we were living in chaos. We were living in a place where we weren't wanted. We were living in a place where we were looked at like this every time, We were living in a place where they were coming every day to demand money, extorting us daily, pretty much. They were giving those notices to my children. And there were times where they would show up to the house and I wasn't there, and they would give it to my kids. My kids were like, well, what's this, right? They would stick them on my door. And my kids started to notice too. My kids started to feel there were neighborhood kids that belonged to the parents of some of the people in the meeting, that were not for us. And the kids started saying things to my kids. And it just, I could go down the line of how many things happened that forced me to take my kids and leave. Probably one of the most painful things. If I think back to it and I spend too much time on it, I'll cry. It hurt me. I would have never left that home. Now, because of our history, right? I was uprooted. My kids were uprooted from the States. We came to Mexico trying to put down some roots. And we did, and we had found community. We had neighbors that came to our birthday parties, our quinceañeras. We had a community there. My kids would play, would go to the neighbor's house open, like every day they would come in and out. Kids would come into my house. We had a community there. And we had to leave. We had to leave it behind and start over. And that was painful. We moved the state away. Now, after I moved out, I found a home out in Puerto Vallarta. I moved that far away because I didn't feel safe over there. You guys know there's some things that happened that I didn't mention on this video with other individuals that were part of what he was doing that made me feel like I wasn't even safe to live in that state anymore. So I came all the way over here, started over, tried to, and I thought, okay, well, I'll rent out my house. You know, with what I rented out for, I can use that to sustain some of the expenses I'm incurring over here from this move. Well, in May of that year, I found a friend that wanted to rent it. She had a family of her own, signed a year contract, and she lasted a week. I had gotten a remote control from another neighbor, and given it to that, you know, I thought, well, my remote is turned off, but I'll give, you know, this person that's renting my house, this other neighbor that was friendly enough to let me use it. Well, Jimmy turned that one off too, right? Not only that, but he didn't let him go to the pool. He gave them the same treatment that we had received. He still went and left the fines on the door, knowing I wasn't living then anymore. Although I had asked them to forward them to my attorney, he gave that person and her family the same treatment to where a week later they moved out. They canceled the contract, and I was very flexible. I refunded their money because I was like, I don't blame them, right? I don't blame them. So I was frustrated because I realized, okay, I can't live in it, can't rent it. What the fuck, right? After May, this had been deactivated, right? So they changed the key to the walk-in gate. So I didn't have access anymore. Now, mind you, before this happened, let me back up a little bit. After she moved out, I had another friend that needed a place to stay short term. He was going through some stuff, and I offered him my house. I told him this is what's going on with it. I rented it to him for dirt cheap. I said, if you're willing to put up with this motherfucker, like, you know, you could stay there for this amount. So he was like, okay. Well, that person had some medical issues, had surgery, and he came home one day, right? He didn't have a remote, but his key didn't work. They changed the key to the walk-in gate without telling me, without giving me a copy. So I was officially locked. My renter is locked out of my property. He called me. I had to call around, get a hold of neighbors, see if they would let him in. Right. So the next day, shortly after, I went with my attorneys, the renter, we went to Jimmy's house. And I'm going to show you a clip. We served him a formal notice. By now, I think I forgot to mention that I had been paying my monthly obligation to the courts because Jimmy had refused to accept my money. So I had been going to the courts. I was not past due. So we went to his house and we served him a formal just request for him to reactivate my services. Reminded him that although he had also been served, that I was current with my obligations and there was no legal justification for why my services were off, right? From this to them mowing my lawn, my renter don't have an access to the pool, they don't have keys, right? When we went, Jimmy gave us just a copy of the key to the walk-in gate, right? He didn't reactivate our services. And in that conversation with my attorney, mind you, I stayed on the sidewalk because I didn't want to cause issues. He told him, you don't have the right to even bring in your car because you're past due. You can only come in through the walk-in gate. You have to park your car outside and you don't have access to the pool, the grass, blah, 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 because you're past due. And my attorney was like, well, she's not past due. Here's a notice from the court and you've been served. Until the judge tells me, until I have a verdict from a judge that I'm doing this incorrectly, I'm not gonna, So my attorney was like, all right, well, there's no point arguing with him. We'll go, he signed the notice that he received it and we went on our way. And my attorney just told me we're gonna have to sue. So that happened in June of 2024, right? The person I was renting to said, I can't deal with this, and he moved out. So there's two people now that have tried to rent my home, haven't been able to because this man is making their life impossible the same way he made it impossible for me. This particular gentleman had just had surgery and couldn't afford to get out of his car and walk. He couldn't walk very well. And so, that night he had to wait outside for someone else to come let him in. He had to go, this was a whole issue. Imagine trying to rent a house like this, right? So my house has been empty since. And I had started to try to build a case against him because I knew this is not right. There's no way. Now in June of 2024, after that happened, I was already working with the prosecutor's office. I had filed a criminal complaint against the entire board. They were served. And I need to back up a little bit. In May of that year, my co-owner of my home, which some of you guys know is my mom, aware of everything that was going on, she flew down and had a meeting with him and the HOA board. I've also shared the recording of that meeting on this channel. And she offered to demolish the rooftop, right? We had made an offer to pay for solar panels, declined. We made an offer to pay for the security house, declined. So we made an offer to, okay, let's meet in the middle. We'll knock down the rooftop. Declined. In that meeting, my mom tried to mediate with them, and it became very apparent that this was a personal issue. Mind you, my mom is not somebody that went in there and like, oh, this is my daughter, she's right. My mom was the first one to hold me accountable. She was the first one to tell me certain things were not done right, that I was responsible for A, B, C, and D. She's not somebody that's like, oh, no, my daughter, which is why she went to this meeting. I was even against her going to this meeting, okay? I was like, fuck this shit. Like, fuck them, mom. Like, no, you don't know. Like, I've already tried. She goes, no, I'm going to go talk to them. I was against even offering to demolish the rooftop. That was my hard money and work that I had put to build that rooftop. So I didn't want to even offer, right? I actually got into an argument with my mom about this. I cried about this. I felt like she was siding with him. I was like, Mom, like I pleaded with her not to do this. She went, she had this meeting. She made this, this offer in hopes of a truce. They said no. Jimmy said the whole thing needs to come down. And he told her, and if you don't do this, we're going to sue you. We're going to take the rights to your home. It will be auctioned off. And my mom left that meeting and she's like, I felt intimidated. He made it sound like he's going to take her home. I don't want to lose our home. So if we have to demolish it, we're going to demolish it so we don't lose it. Right? And I was like, no. I was like, we're not demolishing. I was like, no, Mom. I was like, this makes no sense. And I'm holding up the paper where the city already sealed it, signed it. I paid the fine that I needed to pay the city for doing this without their permission to begin with. Right? But I'm like, this makes no sense that this man says A, B, C, and D. But my mom was like, he's so sure of it. Right? So by now, my mom decides like, okay, there's something personal here. She passes the buck back to me, and I decide to try to handle this with the courts, right? So between February and October of that year, I was running back and forth to prosecutor's office. I had filed a criminal case for harassment and a few other things against the whole board. They were served with a notice for mediation on my behalf in October. And I thought this is where we'll be able to negotiate, right? I wanted to negotiate. I didn't want to take this to court. I wanted just peace. I wanted to be able to live in my home, rent it. But this man had me like this over my house, right? So I thought, okay, well, mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday. The weekend before that Tuesday, a rock came through my window in my new home in Puerto Vallarta. Some of you guys were around for that. It was very traumatic. It almost hit my daughter in the head. And I have the firm belief that these people are responsible for it. I have evidence. I have videos. The same individual that threw dog shit out my window, I believe the same individual that was throwing the dog shit out my window when I lived in the home is the same individual that I believe threw a rock or employed somebody to throw a rock through my new home in Puerto Vallarta. That was a really tough time for me because I knew that I was applying legal pressure and this is how they were responding. And I was very intimidated and I was scared. And I remember considering moving again. I didn't want these people to know where I lived. I didn't feel safe. And 2 days later, instead of moving, I decided to enroll into law school. I decided I need to know how these things work. I feel like I wasn't getting anywhere in my case. I felt like I was given the runaround. I felt like I was getting taken advantage of by multiple attorneys. I had put out so much money and I didn't feel like this was getting anywhere. I felt like this doesn't make sense. All these things are happening and the authorities are not doing anything, right? So I understood that there's something here that I'm missing. I don't have an understanding of the system. I don't have a knowledge of how this works. Mind you, the prosecutor's office that I was going to at the time was the same prosecutor's office that the person that threw dog shit at my window was reporting to. Okay, so yes, they had friends within that system. Yes, they knew people. Yes, they had an advantage over me because I'm a foreigner. And they have, you know, friendships and relationships with people because they've lived here their whole life in that tiny little town. So I'm up against a fucking monster. I'm up against a monster of a corrupt system to begin with. These Mexican nationals that know their way around, that have connections, and then there's little old me trying to handle this with the mentality of an American, thinking that the courts are going to respond like they do in the United States, and they weren't. They were throwing me in a little ring around the rosy, taking my money left and right. All these attorneys, I went through multiple attorneys. I didn't know what they were doing, that weren't helping me, that were just getting me like short-term results to make it seem like something was happening, like the mediation notice, like all that was bullshit. Okay, I got into school and I realized I need help. I need knowledge. I need connections. I need people that know people, and I'm talking about attorneys. I need attorneys that know how this works, that know how to move this, right? Because at the time, I had attorneys from Vallarta that were trying to work a case in Nayarit. That alone was not a good idea because they didn't have knowledge. They didn't have relationships with court clerks over there. All of that matters here. All of that matters, right? So I decided to get into school. In 2024. And February 2025 rolls around and a new meeting, right? They host a new HOA meeting that is also available on my YouTube channel. And this meeting, I thought it was gonna go great. I showed up with 2 attorneys that had been working the civil case and the criminal case. 2 of them, 2 men, right? The first time I had showed up with a woman, this time it was with 2 men, and I thought for sure, like, it's gonna go well. Go watch that meeting, it didn't go well. They did the same shit. Jimmy got up there and said, she's this far past due, she hasn't done this, she hasn't done that. We're not gonna talk about this issue anymore. We've already talked about it last year, and she's not listening, so we're gonna continue to fine her every day until, you know, and as of this date, she owes this much money. My attorneys tried to intervene. They didn't wanna listen to my attorneys. They didn't even let us talk in that meeting. You know, my attorneys are like, we're paying. She has an intention. She wants to be part of the community. Like, what does she need to do? She needs to knock this down. My attorneys are arguing, yeah, but she has the permits now. She now counts with the permits that you guys said she didn't have. She has them. She got right with the city. She paid the fine to the city. So what more do you guys want? Right? And they just shut them up. They just shut them up.
Bueno, yo me hubiera gustado que me constara usted como administradora, ¿verdad? Porque precisamente para evitar el...
Más las multas aplicadas diariamente a partir de marzo.
Yo tengo una pregunta respecto a la casa 13. Las multas, ¿dónde dice que las tiene que aplicar diariamente? ¿Han modificado su reglamento? ¿Legalmente están facultados para ello?
¿Puedo tomar la palabra?
Sí.
Ya se ha hablado en 2 asambleas de la casa 13. Ya hemos comentado que la actitud de la señora de la casa 13 de no hacer ningún caso de las recomendaciones de que no construya, de que no haga lo que le den en gana, las ha tirado por el borde. Ya se están recuperando las firmas para que la señora la obligue el juez a vender su propiedad en subasta pública. En eso estamos en trámite. ¿Por qué no se ha terminado el trámite? Porque nos hacían falta todavía algunos aspectos que redondear de la AC. Ahorita que ya tenemos toda la facultad legal para hacer la demanda y demás, vamos a proceder a hacer la demanda. Pide la ley, el reglamento dice que el 51% del voto, pero la ley dice que el 75%. Entonces, necesitamos juntar el 75% de las firmas de los vecinos para solicitar que ella y la casa 53 o que sea pongan su casa en remate. Si no quieren aceptar las normatividades y la voluntad de la asamblea, pues no son bienvenidos en el condominio. Ya se le expuso, ya vino, es propietaria junto con su mamá, la señora Ana Karen, propietaria de la casa 13, ya vino hasta su mamá a platicar con nosotros. Su forma de conveniar y su forma de resolver los problemas es, yo hago una aportación para el condominio y ya dejen de molestarme. No es estarla molestando. Eso ni siquiera contraviene el reglamento, contraviene la ley. Estamos regidos por una ley que dice régimen de propiedad del condominio. En su artículo 17 dice que usted no puede modificar el entorno visual del condominio ni modificar la fachada de su casa ni pintar de otro color, y la señora lo hizo, a pesar de que evidentemente se invadió a la casa 12, invadió a la casa 14, eso yo ya no sé, pero está con una construcción ilícita. Entonces, por el hecho de estar ella violentando el reglamento, buscando una multa todos los días, imagínense ustedes el supuesto caso de que yo hago mi construcción, hago mi casa y me ponen mi multa de 200 pesos y ahí nos vemos. Suena como que un poco infantil la situación, ¿no? Ahora, eso lo va a determinar un juez, no lo va a determinar el señor licenciado y por supuesto mucho menos yo, pero nosotros estamos aplicando esas multas porque están contraviniendo el reglamento y diariamente lo está contraviniendo, a pesar de que diariamente se le pidió que dejara de hacerlo. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que pasa? Las multas se están aplicando. Si el juez dice que las multas no proceden, nada más se le aplicará una multa de 200 pesos. Lo que sí está contraviniendo es la ley, y a la ley no le puede hacer enmienda y lo está modificando porque está ampliando su casa. Si alguien me dice, ¿y por qué la casa 1 sí permite eso? Porque ellos no están modificando su casa. Ellos tienen un terreno excedente en donde así se les vendió y pueden construir algo ahí, con la aprobación del comité de vigilancia, misma con la que cuenta. Sin embargo, la casa 13 nunca solicitó una aprobación al comité de vigilancia, nunca nos tomó en cuenta como vecinos ni como condóminos de traer sus trabajadores. Ustedes acaban de ver hace un momento, está una revolvedora, sin ningún problema llegan y almacenan cosas enfrente de su casa, como si esto fuera un terreno baldío, sin importarle todos los demás vecinos. Entonces, se están juntando las firmas para poder hacer este trámite legal. El juzgado dictaminará si estamos equivocados o no estamos equivocados. Por lo pronto, como no ha pagado cuotas de mantenimiento y tenemos que ir a ver la fecha en la que pagó las cuotas de mantenimiento, efectivamente, con el juzgado que esos pagos se los recibimos para pagos de multas, porque primero tendría que pagar sus multas, no puede hacer lo que a una persona le convenga y sacar los datos del condominio. Si no está de acuerdo, pues no lo recibimos y seguimos con el juicio. Mientras no se reciban, no tiene derecho a acceso con el vehículo, ni siquiera tiene acceso con vehículo al condominio, ni él, ni sus visitas, ni sus empleados. Entonces, en este momento que tiene 4 carros aquí adentro, bueno, no 2 porque 2 son de la casa 1, tendrían que estar afuera en la calle. Entonces, si le estamos aplicando ese reglamento al de la casa 53, también tendríamos que aplicarlo al de la casa 13. No pueden entrar sus carros hasta que no finiquite sus adeudos con el condominio. Y vamos a seguir el pleito, o el proceso, no es pleito, el proceso con el juzgado para que determine si tenemos o no tenemos razón. Yo no entiendo de un juzgado, de un juez, que diga, no, si aquí la ley no le vamos a hacer caso y que la señora, por favor. No estoy yo inventando nada, ni siquiera podemos decir que el reglamento, que si tiene validez, no señores, eso lo marca la ley del régimen de propiedad de condominio para bienes raíces del estado de Nayarit. Entonces, ¿está contraviniendo eso? Está mal. ¿Por qué se le está aplicando una multa diariamente? Porque diariamente está incurriendo en eso y así se le notificó. ¿Qué hizo con las primeras multas de los primeros 30 días? Las despegó de la pared de su casa y las tiró a la basura enfrente de todos para que viéramos su desprecio por acatar las normas. Las aventó a la casa 14. Para que nosotros veamos el desprecio que tiene por las normas y las leyes que nos rigen dentro de un condominio. La señora cree que puede hacer lo que quiere y en la manera que quiere. Yo no quiero ni pretendo hacer lo que quiero y en la manera que quiero. Yo solamente pretendo que se respete la ley. Entonces, la ley marca eso, hay que ajustarnos a lo que dice la ley. Sea buena o sea mala, está puesto en la ley. No es cuestión de reglamento, es cuestión de ley. Y ella está infringiendo la ley. Y en nuestro reglamento dice que se tendrán que aplicar multas cada vez. Entonces, se están aplicando las multas diarias. Si el juzgado considera que no son adecuadas, ellos nos dirán. Eso es todo lo que al respecto. Ya lo tocamos 2 veces en la asamblea, ya se hizo la asamblea extraordinaria para autorizar la votación.
Realmente nosotros venimos no tanto para venir a pelear, ni para argumentar si es legal o es ilegal. Lo que sí es necesario puntualizar algunas cosas. El permiso de esa construcción, tenemos unos WhatsApp del señor Jaime, en donde incluso él abría el portón y apoyaba a la señora Karen para que entraran sus trabajadores en su momento. También tenemos unas conversaciones y los podemos circular para que todos los conozcan, ¿no? De la señora Andrea Cuervo, que hasta hoy tengo el gusto de conocerla, en donde solicitó algunas solicitudes en su casa, que está el vecino, para que la obra que se autorizó por el señor Harvey se le permitió mediante estos WhatsApp, le hicieran algunas, nomás de oportunidad, digo, no quiero tener debate para no alargar tanto el tema. Sé que se le hicieron algunos daños, algunas solicitudes, se trató de cuidar su propiedad, si se hizo bien o se hizo mal, bueno, pues al final ahí está el antecedente. Lo que es importante destacar son los WhatsApp de autorización del señor Javier para hacer esa remodelación. Aquí están las conversaciones donde él ayudaba a abrir el portón para que entraran los trabajadores a la casa.
Ayudar es diferente a autorizar.
¿Perdón?
Ayudar es diferente.
Creo que nada más quiero aclarar algo antes de que el licenciado nos continúe informando.
No.
¿Nos permite?
Eso sí, por eso. Pero estamos hablando
¿Cuánto nos va a costar el pleito del juzgado?
En el reglamento y en la ley no está prohibido modificar el tamaño.
Pero estamos a tiempo.
Los permisos, pero
la señora podría construir en su patio
los permisos
el primer, la planta baja y el primer nivel, que fue
¿dónde está lo ilegal?
lo que se le dijo que
Todos
podía
los
hacer.
permisos.
Cuando empezó a subir de
Licencia de
nivel,
construcción, terminación de obra,
ahí es
antigüedad.
cuando contravenía la ley.
2 veces le cayó desarrollo urbano.
Se presentó la demanda
Todos los
de
permisos de
desarrollo
construcción, ahí
urbano
está.
por la construcción ilícita en tiempo. No la quisieron recibir.
Entonces,
bueno, la recibieron, pero no le dieron trámite ni salida
Sí.
porque no éramos el representante legal del condominio. Yo como administrador no tenía la capacidad legal de demandar. Ahora sí ya la tengo.
No la tiene
Y
tampoco para darle permiso a la señora.
No puede haber ya hecho el atractivo. Ya
la cuestión se le explicó claramente. No puede construir nada que afecte la fachada y el entorno. Si hace un cuartito atrás, si pone un tejabán para ampliar su cocina, o lo que guste, mande, no molesten.
Yo nomás pedía que nos dieran la oportunidad de escucharnos. O sea,
Si no nos deja hablar,
ya no
yo
hay
creo
que
que
seguir.
tenemos el derecho de réplica, la verdad. No le quitamos mucho
Pero es
tiempo.
que ese tema se va a ver como ustedes dicen en el juzgado.
¿Por qué tienes que llevar?
Lo que nos vaya a costar, lo vamos a
¿Por qué
ver en
tienes
el
que llevar
legado.
a todos los demás condóminos al juzgado?
¿Para qué nos vas a llevar? A todos los condóminos.
Yo creo que ya.
No, yo no sé llevar, de veras no pienso.
Yo creo que
Nada más tiene que ir el apoderado legal.
yo
o facultad para resolver
sí, mire,
eso.
usted como presidenta
Entonces,
del comité,
yo como vecina de la casa 12 le estoy diciendo que ese no es un tema que podamos resolver
sí
aquí,
se puede resolver
que
porque
se tenga, que se negocie donde se deba negociar y vamos a seguir.
acaban de resolver temas de quitar cuotas de mantenimiento, de que unos no paguen, de gente que no vive le cortan el paso, le van a dar los servicios. Y hay una persona que quiere pagar, que quiere colaborar con ustedes y ustedes no lo permiten.
Ninguna de las personas que estamos contando
las instancias a en muchas ocasiones se le ha dado la oportunidad de dialogar, de platicarlo, pero cuando te encuentras con la opción de que háganle como quieran, yo no voy a quitar eso. Todos saben que la señora postea sus cosas en redes sociales, es muy respetable. No se vale que ofenda a unos vecinos, a algunas vecinas, valiéndose de estar atrás de una cama. Yo creo que eso es injusto. ¿Con qué cara viene a negociar algo aquí? Todos los vecinos son receptivos a querer negociar. Nadie queremos un pleito legal. Yo le he dicho a ella, a mí en lo personal,
yo sé que tú
no
lo has
me
dicho.
interesa qué bueno que esté generando condiciones para su familia y que estén en un lugar más cómodo, ¿no? Yo se lo he dicho en una ocasión,
sabemos
que fue
de ti.
a pagarme el mantenimiento y yo le dije, dígame lo que quiera decirme. Y ella muy claramente dijo, a mí me da gusto, le digo, todos buscamos ese bienestar para nuestra familia. Es bueno, es válido.
Es lo que queremos.
Ahora, se ha tratado de negociar y no se ha logrado.
Profe, la negociación es que se demuele, se tumbe. Eso no es negociar.
No es negociación, es lo que marca la ley.
No, más bien, a eso venimos a la asamblea. Así como hay propuestas. Oye, profe, dime qué hago para que me permitas usar de mi tarjeta, que es lo único, y el paso.
Tire eso y pague sus multas.
¿Dónde está la negociación?
Es que no hay negociación.
Es una obligación que
A ti
tiene.
estaría justo que ya después negociamos nosotros y suban el TikTok y yo me salí con la mía, yo se lo quiero porque tengo dinero. Lo vas a ver, mañana vas a ver.
Mañana va a ver los TikToks, ahorita está grabando sin nuestro consentimiento.
Mañana lo vas a ver.
No, la ley no le permite que nos graben y nos tomen videos sin nuestro consentimiento.
A ver, permítame, la empatía tiene que ser recíproca. El día que ella quiso hablar conmigo, yo le abrí la puerta de mi casa, ¿cierto? Le permití ingresar
pero ya me está dando un
y
punto de
hablamos.
negociación y un compromiso.
Y
de
luego
decir
usted
que si
tuvo a
llegamos a un
bien
acuerdo,
tratar de
queda aquí
exhibir
y no se sube en ninguna red social.
una
Nos comprometemos
situación
a que así sea.
en las
Ya
redes
estás dando un
sociales
punto.
que generó su misma falta, porque a mí mí me tuvieron que poner esos paneles de esa forma porque su construcción obstruía la correcta colocación. Yo el compromiso, y así fue se lo comenté a la administradora, don Jaime estaba de testigo porque él estaba con el técnico. La escucha activa significa entender el mensaje del emisor. Escuche. Usted está bloqueando porque trae una idea preconcebida.
Licenciado.
Aquí el punto es este.
¿Para
Hay
qué
que ser
necesita grabar las
empático.
conversaciones?
¿Para qué?
Ella
¿Para qué
tiene
necesita
empatía, que muestre empatía.
¿Son precedentes?
No.
Son precedentes. Son precedentes jurídicos. Son precedentes jurídicos.
O sea, exacto.
Así es.
Exacto.
Mira, es como, mira, no te voy a decir,
Estamos llegando a un acuerdo como gente adulta.
no te voy a decir que en muchas asambleas de muchos condominios las graban y las videograban y no hay ningún problema. Entonces, pero aquí te repito.
Pero este fin no es
aquí te
para
repito,
eso, sino para tener contenido en TikTok.
Está bien.
Aquí es
Está bien.
no estamos dispuestos a invertir tiempo en satisfacer la necesidad de atención de una persona. Nada más.
¿Y cuál es su propuesta? ¿Qué propuesta tienen
Nosotros
ustedes?
venimos, o sea,
Mira,
la
propuesta es que las cuotas de mantenimiento están consignadas.
La ley dice que es una construcción.
Pagar.
Las construcciones son ilegales.
Los permisos de construcción no te los podemos mostrar. O sea,
¿Y cuál es la propuesta?
pagarle sus cuotas de mantenimiento que se deben. O sea, tu propuesta es que yo venga con una máquina, un demoledor y lo tumbe y me lo lleve. Esa es tu propuesta. Eso, ya quieren pagar y no demoler. Es una propuesta lógica. Pues dígame, ¿cómo negociar?
Es que nunca paré de pagar.
O sea, ¿qué
Yo
quieres?
siempre he estado pagando.
¿Que votemos para el portón? ¿Te pago las cuotas y el 50% de tu portón? ¿Eso quieres por sanción? Lo hacemos. O sea, pero pues están metidos en el TikTok. Eso es negociar, ¿me explico?
Claro, no, sí, pero justamente lo que decía la señora.
La cuota de mantenimiento no hemos votado, sería lo
Sí, yo calculo que está un poquito excedido 1.200 pesos.
No pueden salir a la propiedad a las personas.
No lo puedes cambiar la propiedad. Está cobrando más o menos 1.100. Depende también de
Pues vamos a seguir.
Pero yo calculo que 1.100 sería una buena propuesta.
Pues debemos explicar eso. Al menos explicarles cómo funciona la demanda. Que todos vamos a tener que pagar.
Ya, se supone que no saben lo que es.
And they just shut him up. They just shut him up. In that meeting, Jamie tells me, you know, she has to pay this amount and she can't even sell it. She cannot sell it without me giving her a letter that states she doesn't owe this community anything. And that is a requirement for you to sell a house within an HOA community, right? So in that moment, I understood, like, this man has me like this. Like, I can't live in it. I can't rent it. And now he just told me I can't sell it because I was so discouraged at that point that I did want to sell. There were points where I was, I just want to get rid of this problem. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I feel beat. I'm up against an entire community that misunderstands me and they don't care. They don't have any empathy for me. They don't care that there's 5 kids that were displaced. They don't care that I'm nothing. Nothing was working, right? But now I couldn't even sell if I wanted to. And if I wanted to sell it under those conditions, I would have to sell it for dirt cheap to somebody that knew I'm selling it to you with this huge legal issue ahead of you. Nobody's going to want to buy a house like that. Nobody wants to rent a house like that. I don't even want to live in a house like that, and I own the motherfucker, right? So in February of 2025, after that meeting, I was done. I was like, they're just not, they won't hear me out. These people don't care. They don't let me speak in these meetings. I don't know what else to do. Long story short, I found another attorney that month. Criminal defense attorney that specializes in criminal defense. So she knows both sides of the bench. Long story short, she helps me file another criminal complaint. This time centered around Jimmy because we've now understood. I understood after those 2 meetings that it's not my neighbors. It's him. They're believing him because he's so good at the way that he expresses himself. He was getting up there speaking like an attorney, citing article this, the law says this, she's not following the law. By all means, they are under the impression that I am a non-law abiding problematic neighbor that just wants to do what I want, and I don't care about anybody else in there. And I think that because I have money, I can do whatever I want. That is how he has presented me. It's how he has verbalized, made specific statements. She thinks because she's Ana Garcia, she could do whatever she wants. So I began to see that my neighbors believe him. And if I was him, if I was them, maybe I would too, right? So I came to a point where I'm not even after the HOA anymore. It's him. And I started looking back and I understood this is personal. This is personal because I'm a woman that's been questioning him since 2020. I'm a woman that has been breaking the rules against him since 2020. I'm a person that hasn't been listening to him since 2020. I started looking back at our history where I have been historically this woman that's problematic to him and doesn't do what she's told when she's told. And because of that, he's going to make an example out of me. I understood it in February of 2025, how personal this was. And I understood why my neighbors were taking the position that they were. By all means, this man is telling them, she owes us this much money. She doesn't care. Her kids do this, blah, 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 you know? So I started to feel a little bit of empathy for my neighbors. And also, mind you, I've been studying law at this point. I started to understand that they don't have an understanding of law. And they're just going off of what he's feeding them, right? So this case, filed in February of 2025, starts to move forward because we have specific behaviors that I have been able to document, including those meetings. I know a lot of my neighbors were upset that I was recording everything, including the HOA meetings, that I was posting it on social media. All those recordings are now the basis for this criminal case, right? I had begun to document every month I had gone to pay my HOA obligations. I had been documented every time he was served. I had documented when we went with my attorneys. I had documented everything, right? And I kept doing it. In February of 2026, the state picked up my case. What does this mean? It means that, after a lot of work, which involved witnesses, interviews, filings, copies, certified copies, jumping back and forth. I spent an entire year working alongside the prosecutor and my attorney to build this case. And finally, in February of 2026, the prosecutor said, we have a case here. You have a case here. You have evidence here. We're bringing this to a judge. This was just in February of 2026. And I still didn't believe. And my attorney kept telling me, just be patient, this is going to happen. And I just kept feeling, I was so discouraged, so beat down by then that I was just like, all right, I don't lose anything in trying because what else can I do at this point? I've already lost my home. I've already lost this amount of money. I've already gone through all of this. On February 2026, she calls me and says, we have a court date, March 2nd. Write it in your calendar. And I said, okay, not entirely understanding what this means, but, we had talks about arresting him. The charges presented that we're toying with is extortion, unlawful dispossession, threats, bribery, and fraud. We're toying around with multiple, trying to see which one fits. Extortion is a very serious crime in Mexico. In fact, I remember when this was happening thinking this is what it feels like when they charge you to have your business open. I remember hosting a live saying that me están cobrando piso for my house. He's charging me a daily amount for my home to exist. And I remember saying, I feel like I'm being extorted, right? And so extortion is a crime that requires the individual to be arrested, and it requires for them to be held without bond throughout the duration of the entire case. Because of his age, we opted not to file charges on extortion. He is a 66-year-old man. And although there were a lot of times where I thought oh, I hope he goes to jail. I can't wait for him to get arrested. When the moment came, I felt pity for him. I did. So instead, we opted to file the charges for dispossession, threats, and bribery. And that could be issued through a criminal summons that we served 3 days prior to the hearing.